The wind-blown sands filled in the heavily weathered enclosure and buried the statue up to its neck. This thick blanket of sand protected the Sphinx from further erosion for thousands of years. But what about the face? Almost certainly it's been recarved, maybe several times. Since nothing's been found to identify the Sphinx, we may never know who it was meant to represent. Under the reign of the pharaoh Chephren, the Sphinx was uncovered and the first of many repairs was begun. Time passed. The desert reclaimed the Sphinx. 1,000 years later, Thutmose IV again uncovered and repaired the great statue. This cycle was repeated several times over the next 3,500 years. There are many stories about how the Sphinx lost its nose. Some legends suggest it was Napoleon's army. Others say that Arab gunners were to blame. According to ancient lore, you could kill the spirit of a statue by destroying its nose. But the spirit of this great statue lives on. The computer recreation we've just seen illustrates the history of the Sphinx, according to Dr. Schock and John West. But it doesn't address the question, who built the Sphinx?
I think our initial investigation around the Sphinx was very successful from a couple of different perspectives. One, we got hard, defensible data on the degree and the nature of the weathering of the limestone surrounding the Sphinx, all of which supports Bob Schock's theories. But even more exciting and more interesting to me is the unexpected discovery of several large cavity features around and under the Sphinx. This is a fairly large feature. It's about 9 meters by 12 meters in dimension and buried less than 5 meters in depth. Now, the regular shape of this, rectangular, is inconsistent with naturally occurring cavities. So there's some suggestion this could be man-made.
Man-made. It's very interesting. Keep that in mind for just a minute. There have been many predictions about the role the Sphinx would play in our future. One of the most compelling was by this man. Edgar Cayce gained popularity in the mid-40s as America's sleeping prophet. In deep trance, Cayce revealed detailed information about ancient Egypt. 50 years ago, Cayce predicted that a chamber would be found under the front paws of the Sphinx. This chamber, he said, would contain records of the civilization that inspired the entire Egyptian culture. He called that civilization Atlantis. According to Cayce, the Atlanteans were a technologically advanced society who fled to Egypt when their continent of Atlantis sank into the ocean to be lost forever. Fantasy, wild dreams, maybe. But the unexpected cavities detected by the seismograph were located precisely where Edgar Cayce said they would be, under the front paws of the Great Sphinx. A seismograph does not dream.
If the Greeks were inspired by the Egyptians, and the Egyptians were inspired by the mythological Atlanteans, then who inspired the Atlanteans? One of the most unusual and intriguing ideas I found in my research is the possible connection between the Sphinx and the planet Mars. In 1976, NASA sent 2 Viking spacecraft to Mars to photograph the planet and test for the presence of life. 2 of these photographs revealed a large human face accompanied by a massive 5-sided pyramid. Some call the face the Martian Sphinx. These findings were presented at the United Nations to an audience of scientists and journalists. Here's an excerpt from that presentation by Richard C. Hoagland, science writer and winner of the Angstrom Medal for Excellence in Science for his research in the Mars investigation.
Artifacts. And in 1976, during the unmanned mission to Mars, the Viking mission, lo and behold, on frame 35A72, taken on an afternoon on Mars of a northern Martian desert called Cydonia, we, the human race, NASA, the United States of America, the American people who paid for the mission, spotted and noted an enigmatic artifact that did not belong, the so-called face on Mars. Now, many things have happened in the ensuing years, but I wanted to show you the original data to show you how far we have come, because, of course, the official response when this photograph was first presented to the media and to the world was that it was, in fact, a trick of light and shadow. Well, from that has come an investigation, some books, some videos, a lot of discussion, and we are here this afternoon. Now, this is a computer-enhanced version of exactly the same image done 15, 16 years later. Notice the remarkable level of detail, crossed lines on the forehead, scalloping on the left side here, the suggestion of teeth in the mouth, deep-set eyes. But again, if we only had one picture, we would never know if, as NASA has said consistently for 16 years, this was merely the most marvelous trick of erosion on the surface of any planet, or, in fact, was something else. For that, you require another set of data, such as this. This is now a second frame taken 35 days after the first frame. And DiPietro and Molinari, two imaging engineers at the Goddard Space Flight Center who got into this very early on in 79 and 80, they were the ones, not NASA, to cull through the 60,000 Viking images in the archives and to find this picture. And when they processed it, lo and behold, this object turned out to be remarkably bilaterally symmetric. Now, we mean by that it seems to have a left and a right half. There appear to be two eye sockets, the mouth goes through, the hairline appears to go around, there's proportionate symmetry, about 95%. Now, facial expressions we see in mountains or in landscapes here on Earth are inevitably perspective shots, profiles, where if you move 100 meters one way or the other, they go away. What made this different was it was a frontal, full-on facial view, as if you were looking at yourself in some kind of cosmic mirror. And maybe that's a telling metaphor for exactly what this was intended to be, if and when we climbed up the ladder to spaceflight, journeyed across space to Mars, and looked down and saw it staring back. Time will tell. For the last 9 years, the argument has raged regarding the reality of this object as a constructed artifact. Well, our focus has now begun to shift. We're looking more at the meaning of this object, including a possible connection with the Earth. The key to our apparently successful solution to the riddle of Cydonia, which is the name of the region on Mars where Viking initially photographed the face, turned out not to be the face at all, but a 2-mile-long, half-mile-high, 5-sided pyramid located a few miles away. It was Eero Toren, our team member on loan from the Defense Mapping Agency, who cracked the code, because Toren found, when measuring the internal geometry of the D&M pyramid, that it contains incredible geometric structure, fundamental mathematical constants, which in the universe are the key to signifying the presence of intelligence. This is the Sphinx. We're now looking at a structure, a magnificent, monumental work of art created at a time when nobody else on planet Earth is supposedly able to do anything of that magnitude or scale. There's no other contemporary civilization to pin it on. So who did it? And before you say Martians, just sit there and listen, okay? Okay, I don't want you to leap here. Science has now opened. I mean, rigorous science has opened the doorway to what, in I think it was John's parlance, the dreaded A word, Atlantis. Is it conceivable that the mythos that came down to us through Plato, speaking of a prior high civilization capable of things like this, is maybe not a myth? But in fact, we're seeing at least one surviving, albeit very ancient, artifact that you can touch of that halcyon day when we could do things that we no longer can do. Something ineffable brushed an earlier phase of human history and left a monument that recorded in some form the echo of that signal.